Hi there, and welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Real Estate Investing. I'm your host, Sharon Vornholt, and I'm so happy you're tuning in today. I have really been looking forward to this show. My guest is Rock Thomas. Rock is the host of the top-rated Rock Your Money, Rock Your Life podcast. He is a best-selling author with over 30 years experience in personal development and coaching. And like many of us, he got his start in real estate. Welcome to the show, Rock.
Hey, I'm thrilled to be here, Sharon.
I know that just a little bit about you. I know that you grew up on a farm in Montreal, Canada, but I want you to tell a little bit about your background and how you got started.
You know, it was the entrepreneurial journey. I just didn't know it. At the age of 8, I started working, solving problems on the farm. And when you live on a farm, you don't have a choice about solving problems. Animals need to be fed. They need to be kept in barns and in fields. And when fences break, you fix them, whether it's nice out or not, or whether it's your birthday or Christmas. So the journey started early in becoming really resourceful, and then it continued on later. And I think that people ask me, well, why are you focused so much on wealth creation and success? Well, if you've ever tried being poor and not having, it's a great motivator. So for me, it really started with, youngest of 7 kids, not getting a lot of attention, not having a lot of resources as far as, clothing and food. So I went out and I worked really, really hard, and I made a mark as an employee, and then later on started running some businesses. And the rest of my life has been the trials and tribulations of learning how to do that. And then I got into sharing those experiences with other people, which became very gratifying. And now I have multiple streams of businesses and online coaching platforms. And honestly, if you had asked me in high school or even in my 20s, if I would have had the privilege to have this much of an impact on so many people, I would have never have thought that would have been possible. So sometimes you just have to take that next step, take that next learning, and then you grow. And before you know it, you look back and you're like, wow, look how far I climbed up this mountain. I can't believe it. I just took one step at a time. And that's really been the journey, Sharon.
That's the secret, taking one step at a time. I think if you try to look too far out, you just can't imagine that future because you're way over here, and then that dream is way over there. So the only way you can get there is one step at a time. So how did you choose real estate?
Gosh, you can be really choosing your job, or maybe it chooses you. And I remember just being on my mom's couch, $30,000 in debt after bankrupting a restaurant, losing my job. And I thought, where now? What do I do now? How do I make some money quickly? And I was reading up on real estate, and I was went through an open house, and I thought, that looks pretty easy. So I thought, if that person could just walk around and show a house, I could do that. And so I got into real estate. Back then, it was a couple of months to get your license, and I actually was terrible the first year. I had no skills with people. I had no recollection of other than working with goats and 2x4s. So I stumbled, and I again ran out of money, and I just got desperate, and I got coachable when I was desperate. So the second year I did really, really well. And then I went on after 4 years. I bought the company I was with, and I got mentored primarily by 2 people. I had a real estate guy, and I had a mindset person. And the combination of those 2 allowed me to have massive success. And then I went on and branched out and got into real estate development and investing. And it's such a beautiful place. There's so many ways you can make money in real estate. You don't actually have to be the smartest person to do it. And that worked really well for me.
So you did some investing? I don't believe that. You did some investing though, along the way?
My very first home I bought was when I was about 23, and I bought it literally with a $2,000 deposit on my credit card and owner financing in the city of Quebec, a French-speaking city. And there was 4 physically handicapped people in the house, and they paid rent. They stayed actually in the lower floor. I stayed in the upper floor, and it had really good revenue. I was making about $1,000 a month as a flight attendant, and they were paying almost $3,000 a month to stay there. So I hired somebody to take care of them during the day. I lived in the property, basically free, and I was able to save some money. And then I went on to start a senior citizen home after I had that experience, and bought a couple of rental properties. And by the time I was around 28 or 29, I owned, I was almost worth $1 million. So I started at a very young age.
So we kind of skipped from real estate agent. You're a farmer, you're on a farm, and then you're a flight attendant, and then you're real estate. Did we skip a step there?
Yeah, I kind of went backwards. We went farmer to flight attendant to real estate investor to bankrupt. When my father got sick with cancer, I took time off to take care of him, and I lost my job in the airlines. And my whole life kind of fell apart. I didn't have really any concepts around mindset or managing things from a distance. And I lost all my investments. I lost my job. I sued the company. It was a bad mistake. My father had back tax debt. I took care of that. And then I was around 30 years old, and that's when I was desperate, and that's when I started to sell real estate. I'd already had the experience of owning it.
Okay.
I knew that was good, but I had no capital now to buy it because I was broke. So I decided to go and sell it. And then when I sold it, make a lot of money, I bought the real estate company I was working for. I had 94 agents. I built it to 270. And I had taken that company from 300 million in sales to over $1 billion in sales a year. I was making 7 figures, and that's when I started to get back into acquiring and purchasing real estate.
So what made you sell? I noticed that you were with a couple of top franchise companies. You had a couple of top franchise companies. What made you leave those businesses?
After 10 years of running a real estate office, I wanted to take my son to Florida and have him live the dream that I didn't get to live, which was to become a professional athlete. Mm-hmm. So I sold everything. We moved to Florida, and for 2 years, I worked with him and other coaches in the field of golf. And after a couple of years, as good as he got, he wasn't quite good enough. So that's when we came back to Canada. My speaking career had taken off by then. I'd written a few books, so I was doing that. And the person I sold the business to went bankrupt. So I took the assets back and I started another franchise in a different name and built it back up again. So that was a bit the reason for the in and the out.
Wow, that's a story. That's a couple of stories within a story. So one of the things I know that you are a mentor. I'm a mentor, but we also believe in having mentors. And I looked at your list of people that you mentored, that you studied alongside of, and some pretty impressive people. Tony Robbins, Jack Canfield, Stephen Covey, a lot of people. My personal favorite, Wayne Dyer, who is, that was a sad day for me when he passed away. And he was someone that I saw right here. I live in Louisville, Kentucky. I got to see him. I got to meet him. And it was such an exciting day for me. But how did you get such an impressive group of people there? You've got quite a collection of people, Rock.
Well, it's pretty simple. What I would do is when I go listen to them speak, I would then stand in line to get their book or go up and talk to them. And I would ask them basically, how could I hang out with you? Or what could I do for you? Or I'll get your coffee, I'll pick up your dry cleaning, anything just to be around you. And in most cases, I got polite, no thank you. And then in many cases, I got, well, if you pay me 10 or 20 or 30 or $100,000, I will coach you and mentor you. And so that was often the route I took. And with Tony Robbins, I worked out with him in his gym in Fiji. I've traveled to Italy with him in his private mastermind group, which was very, very small at the time back in 2001. Today has 600 or 700 people in it. Back then we were 38 people. Mm-hmm. So I got a lot of proximity. I got to spend time with him, have one-on-one conversations. And there's something about being in proximity of people who are completely dedicated to their craft that rubs off on you in a way that a book will never rub off on you. Mm. You hear their spirit, you feel their energy. So it was like that. Jack Canfield was my mentor for one of my books. T. Harv Eker, I worked with as a speaker. He trained me, and I worked with him for 5 years. Now I'm a trainer for Tony Robbins. So I think it's actually just how I did everything. When I was in the restaurant business, I started as a short order chef. I showed up early and I stayed late. I teach people usually how to, if you want to get a raise or partner with the people that you work with, there are ways you can do that. And one of them is show up early, stay late, and say yes to everything. When I was in the airline business, I started off as a flight attendant. I was the only English-speaking kid in the group of 13 flight attendants in a French environment. Didn't speak French, but the manual came in French and English. So I learned along the way, and I had the other flight attendants tell me every day one new French word. I listened to French radio, I watched French TV, I read French newspapers, and through immersion, I learned French in 6 months. And I told a dispatcher, whenever a flight attendant is sick, because we all had these standby days, I said, call me first, call me first, call me first. I'll say yes, I'll make your job easy. So I took all the extra shifts. I got all the experience above everybody else. And when the promotions came up, I got promoted. And within a year and a half, this little 24-year-old kid was running the entire department of flight attendants, hiring, training, doing the security trainings. And quite frankly, Sharon, I didn't know what I was doing, but it didn't matter. It didn't matter. Even though not national security, but the security of the airlines was at risk because I was training these people, I had such a belief that I could figure it out that I did. And this is one of the things I teach today. Say yes and figure it out later. Yeah. Stop saying no when you don't know how, because you're going to grow so slowly and you're going to be filled with fear, doubt, and worry. My whole life has been built on saying yes. Same thing happened in the restaurant business. Started as a short order cook. Before I knew it, I was partners. Same thing happened in real estate. Started as a real estate agent, prepaid my bill 6 months in advance. Before I knew it, they offered to sell me the company. So show up. Say yes, stay late, do whatever, don't make excuses, and the world will bring opportunities to you. That's what's worked for me.
I agree with that totally. We talked a little bit before we started recording. I've always had that mentality to say yes, even if you're momentarily filled with terror, and then figure it out later. I did that with the podcast. I did that with the blog, and people say now, well, you didn't have this fancy launch plan. And back then I would have said, what's a launch plan? We just did it. You know, we said yes. Like you said, we said yes. I know that from your upbringing and from all that you went through, you've changed tremendously as a person. And I looked at your life story, and my parents grew up, they were very poor. They came from very poor families, a lot of adversity. When I look back, my dad started a business. He was a general contractor, but what I remember from all those years is it's hard to make money. You know, it was in a time where you started a business, you built yourself a job, you worked hard. But one thing that I had that always was they gave me this is the gift my parents gave to me. It was the gift of saying you can do whatever you want in this life. You have no limits, no boundaries. Even back all those decades ago, was my dad passed away when I was 16. He always said, you know, being a girl is not a bad thing. You just put all that aside and you pave your path. Well, because I mean, things were very different. You know, he would say, you just got to have your vision and push forward. So I had that advantage that I had parents that gave me that belief, but you didn't have that. So what happened, you know, what life-changing event or what happened that you solidly have that belief now? So it just didn't hit you over the head. What happened?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. I don't think it's ever been put that way before, but I think that everything that we say to ourselves comes from somewhere else. And that's why it's so important to read and listen to podcasts that empower you, etc. We didn't have a TV growing up. And I remember reading this one book by Vernon Howard. And there was one sentence in that book that changed my life. And it said, do what you fear and it will disappear.
Oh, I love that.
And every time I imagined that I had 1,000 Post-it notes on a wall with all the things I was afraid of. Go up and talk to that girl, raise my voice, ask to be the quarterback on the team, all these different things. And every time it popped up in my head, I took a step forward and I took action. And I think it's so powerful. I was lucky that I came across that, because most people, they learn a lot, they get it in their head and they go, well, one day I'll start my business. One day I'll buy real estate. One day I'll write a book. One day I'll ask the girl out on a date. But it's not perfect. I don't know how. What if? I did the opposite. I rushed in. I made a fool of myself. I made massive mistakes, but I learned along the way that life rewards action. And I remember this one time I was working on a set of a movie, and they had this scene with Patrick Dempsey, if you know who that is.
Oh, I do.
Yeah,
McDreamy.
right. And he was like, at the time, 19 years old. He was losing his virginity in this scene in a boat. And it was being filmed at nighttime. It was dark. The water was murky. It was right at this time of year, September. It was chilly out in Canada. And the boat needed to rock up and down, simulating a lovemaking scene. The director goes, action, and the boat doesn't move. He goes, and action, the boat doesn't move. And he's like, what's going on? Money's burning. This, every minute costs hundreds of dollars. And he goes, somebody needs to jump in the water and rock that boat. Nobody moves. I'm this helper hand in the background. And I remember not hesitating. I just ran, jumped in the water, fully clothed, and grabbed the boat and started rocking it. And I go, how's this? As I poked my head out, and he goes, that's perfect. Hide behind the boat.
That's a funny story.
And that was an example, because the very next day, there was another scene where people had to go through mud. Nobody wanted to go through the mud to move something. And he goes, where's that kid that rocked the boat? He'll do anything. And I came over, I strepped through the mud and I did the thing. And then the next day, they asked me to be an extra in the movie. And I got a kissing scene. And I remember saying to myself, I got to kiss this beautiful girl, and imagine that, I'm like 21, 22 years old, on a set, in a movie. And all of that came from that thing. I was willing to jump in the water. And I never forget that. Life rewards action. Say yes, figure it out later. So it didn't matter that I didn't know how. It didn't matter that my father told me that, he didn't support me or encourage me, and that I was capable. He always taught me I could do better. And I just thought, if I combined I could do better with taking action, then I'll be okay. And that's really how I've lived my life.
Well, it's obviously worked incredibly well for you. One question: how did you happen to be working on a movie set?
Well, that's another great story. I always wanted to be on a movie set because I thought it'd be cool, and I wanted to meet cool, stars. So when I heard they were filming outside of my city in Montreal, where I grew up, I went down to the set and knocked on the door and asked for a job as a gopher. And they said, get out of here, private set, So I went away, and I came back the next day at 7:30 in the morning, and I crawled through the fence, and I went up to the guy who was in charge, and I said, hey, I'm here for a job again. He goes, I told you, it's a private set, get out of here. So I went away, and I came back the next day, and I did this day after day after day. And eventually he started to use my name, Rock. I told you, get out of here. It's a private set. And I said, I'll see you tomorrow. He goes, no, Rock, I told you, it's a private set. And I said, no, I'll see you tomorrow. One day I said, maybe somebody won't show up and you'll need me. And he goes, no, don't bother. On the 7th day, I pull into the parking lot and I see him waving frantically from behind the fence. And I'm like, what? Everything okay? I crawl through the hole. I walk up to him. He goes, John didn't show up. Grab the keys. Get that car. You're hired.
I love that story. That's a great story. I know that's something I've heard in some of your podcasts. You say the words that I am, follow you. These are the labels that you give yourself. And we are all so guilty of labeling ourselves. If our parents didn't do it for us, or our mean older brother or sister or whoever, somebody gave us a label. And some people apparently were able to shirk those off, but for most people, it wasn't an easy process to shirk off those labels. We carried them around our whole lives.
Yeah, that's a very good point. At a very young age, people start to label us because we all want to be safe and understand. If I label John down the street as an axe murderer, I'm going to be afraid of him. So I want to make sure and get evidence that, he's a nice guy, he's a kind guy, he's a sweet guy, he's a helpful guy. And then I feel safe and my children are safe around him. So we're all doing it out of a need to feel safe. But at the end of the day, we also do it for other reasons. Like my brother, who was shorter than me, would call me bone dog and pizza face because he wanted to feel better about himself. And it was a mixed marriage. My father was the man of the house, and he felt intimidated by my father, and he thought that I had the inside angle because he was my father. So he looked for ways to level the playing field at my expense. But as a young boy, I didn't know this, and I wanted to be friends with him. So if he said I was skinny and stupid and ugly, well, I guess it was true. He was older than me and probably smarter than me. So we innocently take on these labels, and then we live into them. We look for evidence. So I would go to school and none of the girls would talk to me. So I go, of course, because I'm ugly. And what you seek, you find.
Yes.
So that became a reality for me until in my late 20s, imagine. My late 20s, I understood the technology of reprogramming and of our identity. And then I went and wrote a book called The Power of Your Identity because I learned that we can reprogram ourselves. You can call yourself anything. As long as you repeat it enough and believe it enough, you can say to yourself, like I used to be incredibly serious, and now I've added the word playful into my identity. And given the opportunity to be playful or silly or fun-loving, it's more available to me because I've offered that to myself. So whatever you want to move toward, like I am a badass real estate investor, that's a better title than I make really poor judgments and bad investments all the time. So you really have to decide who you want to be and then write the script of who that is. And then you just, like anybody, I mean, how does a good ad campaign work? It's the same jingle over and over and over. At first it annoys you. You hear it on the radio and you're like, oh my God, how dumb is that? And then if you're not careful, after a while, you're singing to the little Swedish accent guy from IKEA, and you're like, what am I doing? It's actually kind of catchy, right?
Yeah.
So you need to do the same thing with yourself. You do the same thing, I'm gifted, guided, grateful, powerful, passionate, playful. And you can choose the words and you embody them. And then I set an alarm on my phone 7 times a day, and I hear my affirmations. And that's how you slowly transform who you are.
I think it was Wayne Dyer that said, act as if. So, and maybe Deepak Chopra, who I know is another one of the people that you follow, I remember him saying you have to suspend all doubt, and that is not always so easy to do. I think in this case he was talking about health, but suspend all doubt and then just become whatever it is you are trying to become.
Yes. I mean, Aristotle said you are what you repeatedly do. So if you repeatedly behave in a timid and introverted way because somebody said you're shy, then you're going to develop that reference. Instead of, you could just develop simply, I'm the type of person who asks these 3 empowering questions of people. Sharon, what are you passionate about? What's the one thing that you know that I need to know? And what's the favorite thing you do that you do in your time of leisure? You could learn how to become, I was introverted. I took a few courses, Dale Carnegie, Effective Speaking. I read the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And people are like, they would never think I'm introverted. Never.
Yeah.
I have a podcast, I'm a speaker, I'm an author. They would never think that, but I've developed that side of myself.
I think that's so true. I tell people I'm a fully recovered introvert because I was the person who never spoke up, who felt powerless in so many ways. We talk about our RIA meeting. People say they don't know how to go to their real estate meetings and network. I say, oh, I totally get that. Our meeting is about 450 people. And when I first went, my goal was to find a chair with a person I knew. And that was where I made a beeline to. And it is hard work, getting over being introverted. It's not easy, but you can do it. And you're living proof. I would have not thought you were introverted, but yeah, I was horribly introverted.
Introvert is just a code word for fear.
Mm-hmm. I guess it is fear of speaking up, fear of saying the wrong thing, fear of whatever. You could probably put 100 things up on the Post-it notes. So what are you passionate about today? Tell me that.
I am incredibly passionate about helping people live a more joy, happy-based life. And at the same time, usually I've found that money doesn't make you happier, mm-hmm. but the lack of it can make you unhappy. So in a way, it just gives you choice. I mean, let's face it, if you're ill and you have no money, you have less choices to go to a doctor, et cetera. I recently had a knee injury and I was able to get PRP shots and stem cell, cost me about $15,000, but I have the money to do it. And now I'm fully recovered. And I was literally not able to sleep for 6 weeks because of it. Mm-hmm. So that helps me be a happier, better person because I had resources. So I actually help people become financially free, finding the cash flowing assets, either real estate, stocks, or businesses, help them develop that part of themselves. And the reason, Sharon, that people mostly don't do that is, can you remember back when you were maybe a teenage girl and you wanted some money to do something and you went to your parents and you asked for money and they told you this? Well, why, Sharon, why don't you go buy some real estate, invest in the stock market, or open a business?
No, I never heard those words.
Right. They said, go get a
job.
And job stands for just over broke. Trade mm-hmm. your time for money. Mm-hmm. So my passion is to help people understand that there's a skill set that is not that complicated, that they don't teach in school, that can allow you to have cash flowing assets that will make you financially free. And when you're financially free or on the path, we also help you with your mindset. So when you have a solid foundation of a mindset, you have a cash flowing asset or vehicle, it's much easier. Let me put it that way. It's much easier to be a joyful, well-balanced person because you can arrive to your problems in style.
I love that. I love that. So let's talk just real quick about mindset. So many people grow up with a belief system that it affects everything in their life. They have a set mindset. We're back to the labels and things like that. But if someone were to say, I really want to fix my mindset problems, how do they start to do that?
Well, they can buy my book for one. They could
go
listen to my podcast. Mm-hmm. There are pieces to that puzzle, and the identity is a really strong piece. How you see yourself, how you describe yourself, how you talk to yourself are all important. So literally in my book, I talk about the 10 habits that made me a millionaire. And habit number 1 is 30 minutes a day of personal development. So they could listen to a podcast like this. They could read a book by Wayne Dyer or somebody that inspires them and have some thoughts that come in that make them feel that life is possible, that they can do what they want and that they can live the dream. So that's one aspect. Every day, 30 minutes to nourish yourself. Garbage in, garbage out. You listen to crap on radio, you listen to people that are negative, you live in a negative world, you are going to become negative. Environment always wins. Goal setting is an important aspect of life. If you don't have a direction, if you don't have a North Star, the GPS can't bring you there. You don't know where you're going. You're off track, you're unguided, you don't have a mission, a vision, or a purpose, you have meaning to your days, and you flounder. So I just walk people through these different steps. But perhaps the most important is to find a community of like-minded people that are interested in the same thing that you value. So I value, like we talked about before, becoming a whole life millionaire where you create wealth without giving up your health or your relationships. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a pretty good place to start. So I've created a community of people that do that. And then it becomes normal. It becomes normal to be helpful to each other. It becomes normal to exercise and to eat well. It becomes normal to look at ways that are going to create passive income. Instead of 97% of the people in the population, they're broke or not financially free. They're trading time for money in a job that they hate, and they're complaining and they're blaming and they're wishing things were different. There's a language to personal development. Try the conversation around changing some words in your vocabulary. Like, is the word wish useful really? I wish it wasn't raining.
Yeah.
Perhaps just embrace the fact that there's things you can't change and appreciate. Tony Robbins says, change your expectations for appreciation. Don't expect it not to rain. It's going to rain one day. Mm-hmm. Appreciate the rain. Don't expect the stock market to never go down. Don't expect there not to be a recession or a pandemic. When it comes in, I do an exercise. Write down the 10 things you hate about the pandemic that bother you, but then go and write out the 10 things that you love about the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people have started writing things like, I'm spending more time with my family. I got into gardening again. I'm appreciating my house. Mm-hmm. I don't have to wear so much makeup and buy new clothes for no reason, just to keep up with the Joneses. Mm-hmm. So it's really about getting in the right environment and making some better choices as to how you're going to have your own inner narrative.
It's interesting that you brought up that about the gifts of the pandemic, because in the beginning, it was tough. I was traveling, I was speaking, I was attending events, which I love the whole thing. I'm a learning junkie. So I'm, a lifelong learner, a lifelong reader, a lover of books. So when this came down, I had to literally reframe my mindset. I looked up in the beginning, we thought, okay, we can do this for a few months. And then it became apparent it wasn't going to be a few months. And I had to do that with myself, because when you love what you do so much, you have to find the gift in all of this. So I had to purposely sit down and do just what you said. I had to look for, what are the gifts in this? What has this different way of being allowed me to do, to become, to learn? And there are good things about it. I had to do the same thing with winter. Now, you're a Canadian. You probably don't understand this, but I'm convinced I was born in the wrong place. I was meant to be born on a beach, someplace warm. So, but I had to do the same thing with winter. What are the things about winter? Well, it's a season of renewal. You can embrace the darkness and say, I get to maybe sit down and read a book rather than being outside so long, which you would rather do, but you can look for the good in it. So I think that's very interesting that you put it that way. So let's talk about books. I want to talk about your books in a minute, but let's talk about books. What are you reading these days?
I'm reading a great book by Dr. Hawkins called Letting Go.
Okay. Stephen Hawkins?
Yeah. It's just so simplistic, the concept, but we tend to, a lot of our unhappiness, my experience comes from, is hanging on to things and wishing, and I should have, and I would have, and I could have, and beating ourselves up. And I've really gotten into this practice of letting things go. And you know what I discovered is that there's always another great opportunity that's going to come along. Mm-hmm. I should have invested in this. You know what? There's a fantastic investment right now today. I should have sold that. You know what? Hanging on to it can work really well. Mm-hmm. So it's a new practice for me, is to not need to control so much the outside world, but to really allow things to just kind of ebb and flow. And I've noticed that I'm having results with less effort, to sum it up. So I would highly recommend that to people.
You're probably a lot happier living your life that way too. So let's talk about your books. I know you are a published author. Tell everybody about your books.
Yeah, so I wrote a book 14 years ago called The Power of Your Identity. The
Mhm.
words that follow I am, follow you. And it's really become evident that these labels that we talked about before are crucial to how you're going to perform. So imagine an actor getting a role. And in this role, you are going to be a happy, fun loving person. That's your role. And then they go in and they act it. Well, who determined that you should be poor or that you should be incapable of running a business? In my case, how did I become a public speaker when I was introverted and
Yeah.
really my brothers and sisters told me I was stupid and couldn't string a sentence together? So that book is all about changing how you see yourself and then empowering yourself to the highest version of yourself through renewed iterations. My second book is all about the things that I coached people on over the years that I kept on saying over and over and over again as a tool or a resource. I got tired of hearing myself say it, so I recorded it. And in my coaching programs, I would say, okay, listen to rule number 3 or listen to rule number 4, and then we'll discuss it. So rule number 4, for instance, is the 6 shortcuts to motivating yourself. A lot of people know what to do, Sharon, but they don't do what they know. And it's not because they don't know that they should exercise more. They don't know that they should build their business more. They don't know that they should research on what food groups work better for their body type. They know they should, but they don't have the ability or the tools to motivate or stimulate themselves until life comes along and wham, you have diabetes, time to change. The greatest people in the world don't wait for the outside world to tell them how to behave. They set a standard for themselves, like Michael Jordan. They create a goal, a North Star, and a vision for themselves. I want to be the best version I can be. I want to be absolutely the best I could be. That means I got to show up early, stay late, and give it all I got. Pay attention, be curious, practice, and get feedback, and grow and learn. That requires the ability to inspire yourself. I call it the David Goggins of the world. If you haven't read that book, it's another great book.
Read that one.
This is a guy who was in the military and ran 30 miles on broken shins.
Oh, my word.
His ability to push himself beyond the threshold of pain. They say he's the toughest man in the world. And most people go, well, I don't feel like working out. I'm not in the mood to make my calls. And so their life is average. And because they just give in to those feelings. But it's so, let's think about a time when you pushed past some level that you had. You didn't feel like it, but you worked another 4 hours on a overnight shift, and then you made the difference. You completed the project and everybody was happy. Or you didn't feel like working out and then you pushed yourself and you felt so good afterwards. That is actually what people want, is that feeling. So if you can't get yourself to do that, wouldn't it be crucially important to have the tools to activate that part of yourself? So that became my second book, is The Keys to Success, the top 10 habits of millionaires.
I love that title. So I know that you have programs, and before we wrap up today, let's talk a little bit about how people can reach you and about what you have to offer, your services you offer.
Well, I have a private mastermind group where I literally march people to their millions. It's called M1, and we help people become whole life millionaires. So if people really want a deep plunge and they work closely with me, they can do that. It's a 1-year program. But I love to start people kind of somewhere in the middle ground. It's called the 90-day challenge. It's where I walk people actually through my book, The Top 10 Rules of Success. And we really do a coaching call every week on a different rule. We take a deep dive. They are in a Zoom call. They go into breakout rooms and they get to mastermind with other people, discuss it, implement it, and come back the next week. Because knowledge without application is useless. We know that.
Yes.
And yet still people go on Google, they research things, and they don't do anything about it. But the beauty of what's happened with COVID is that it's encouraged more and more people to jump on these Zoom calls and then to participate with other people and learn and apply, learn and apply, learn and apply. And over a 10-week period or 12-week period, there's a transformation. So the 90-day challenge is a wonderful place where we like to develop a relationship, earn their trust. And if we can help them more after that, they graduate to our mastermind group. And if not, then they have a set of tools and a map that can take them anywhere, because these are the foundational blocks that help me become financially free.
Awesome. So I'll be sure to put all those links there so that you can reach out to Rock. You can check out his programs, check out his books. I know you're going to find this information so valuable. Rock, thanks so much for coming on the show today. It was fun.
My pleasure, Sharon. Rock your money, rock your life.
I'm going to remember that. Rock your money, rock your life. Folks, if you like this show, please subscribe and leave us a rating and a review on iTunes. And I will see you same time, same place next week. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and bye for now.